what Europe has done to Africa and the isles of the Pacific and Central and South America. There's a world judgment. But America is the head of the world. The Bible in the book of Revelations calls America that mystery Babylon. A golden chalice on the outside, but filth and abomination of every kind on the inside. This is your America. A murder every few seconds, a rape, a robbery, brutality. That is the order of the day. The most alcohol drinking nation on earth, the most dope using nation on earth, a sick people. Judgment has entered the house. America, an oil junkie, saw that in Iraq, there was the second largest oil reserve in the world. Saddam Hussein and the government of the United States were in bed together at one time. Seemed like they were lovers, like Noriega of Panama, like Diem of South Vietnam, all those who got in bed with America, like Kasavubu, and like Chombe, and like Mobutu Sese Seko. Everybody that gets in bed with him and falls out with him, he turns you over to the dogs. He has no loyalty to those who are loyal to him. Now he lied. The President of the United States lied to the American people that there were weapons of mass destruction in Baghdad, in Iraq. His Secretary of State, Colin Powell, lied. His National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice, she lied. His Vice President, Dick Cheney, he lied. His Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, he lied. Paul Wolfowitz, Under Secretary of Defense, he lied. Richard Pearl, he lied. Liars. And the liars got America involved in a war. Your children, our children, young boys, young girls who see no future in the hood, in el barrio, join the armed forces. It's a job. It's a promise of education to see the world, and then they end up in Afghanistan and in Iraq on the basis of a lie. Who benefited from 9/11? Did you? Did the American people? Do you remember Jimmy Carter the other day said Gore won that election in 2000? He admitted it. But the Supreme Court and the Chads and all of the stuff that they do gave it to Mr. Bush. So on the day he was inaugurated, while some were saying hail to the chief, others were saying hail to the thief. America was divided greatly on September the 10th. Then the 11th came. And on the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th, the shock and America came together. And in the newspaper, there were 19 faces. They knew so much the day after, but claimed to know nothing the day before. So in the trial of Richard Nixon, the people were asked, what did you know and when did you know it? Now it's coming out, so many knew this and knew that, but they didn't connect the dots. You can believe that if you want to. Somebody collected and connected the dots. And the towers came down. Isn't it interesting that those who studied the makeup of that building, the steel that was in that building, the kind of fuel that was in the aircrafts that flew into that building, knew that that kind of heat and that kind of gasoline could not have compromised that building in the way that it was compromised, that it fell straight down, not bothering anything nearby. Something is wrong with that picture. Farrakhan, are you suggesting that that building was purposely destroyed? Well, I don't know. But I tell you what, Hitler burned the Reichstag in Germany, which gave him enormous power to set up some draconian laws that took away the civil liberties of the German people, and he became a fascist dictator. Now let's look at America. Judgment has entered into the house. These people are not above killing thousands to gain power politically or economically. To all of you that are listening to this, this is why the scripture says, we war not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and the rulers of the darkness of this world and spiritual wickedness in high places. Do you remember there was a ship in the Havana, Cuba waters called the U.S. Maine, M-A-I-N-E. They're thinking, the government, about the Monroe Doctrine and that no foreign power should be in this hemisphere. So it was suggested that the Maine, with Americans on board, be blown up. And let's blame it on Spain to provoke a war. So they blew up the Maine, killing Americans, blamed it on Spain, Teddy Roosevelt, the Spanish-American War, the Rough Riders. Then Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines became the possession of the United States on the basis of a lie. When John Fitzgerald Kennedy was our president and Fidel Castro took over in Cuba, they wanted a war with Cuba. So some of those in his, the generals in his joint command, what do you call it? Joint Chiefs of Staff, proposed that they blow up a ship in Guantanamo Bay with American soldiers on and sailors on board, killing Americans and blaming it on Fidel Castro so that it would justify an invasion of Cuba. Now look, brothers and sisters, none of you really can fathom the mind of Satan. You can't think on that level because you are not that kind of mind, but that kind of mind exists. I'm coming closer to home now. When those two towers fell, those were the only ones that a plane went into, but there was another building there that went down too, and nothing touched it. But a landowner became very rich, billions of dollars in insurance. Others that had sold off some of their stock in United and American Airlines had a windfall, and there are people that knew something. Poor President Bush, he was there in Florida in the kindergarten with a reading book upside down. President Bush was a vessel that the neoconservatives found fit for the idea of an imperial America. And he has given himself totally to the idea of the neoconservatives. And it is they who are orchestrating the wars that are not removing enemies necessarily of America that can do harm to America, but doing harm to the enemies of Israel. So the power and might of America is being used to crush Israel's enemies. And so what you're seeing here is the country taken over. The UN told Ariel Sharon and his predecessors, don't build these settlements on the West Bank and in Gaza. They said, we don't care what you all say, we're going to build them anyway, and they did. So now Mr. Sharon says, we're going to tear them down after they were told not to build them. And guess who got the bill? He sent the bill to the taxpayers of America, $2.2 billion, which is $250,000 for every Israeli citizen that is moved of your money, American people's money, and they have such a stranglehold on the Congress that nobody's going to vote against it except Cynthia McKinney. And the strength of a Barbara Lee or somebody like that, but the rest of them, no. Israel gonna get her money, and the treasuries of America have been raped. $340 billion now to support a war, and then comes Katrina. Now, Jesus says, whatsoever a man soweth, the same shall he also reap. The prophet Obadiah said, as thou hast done, so shall it be done unto thee. The bombs that dropped on Baghdad, The next day, the headlines of some American papers quoting Defense Secretary Rumsfeld called it shock and awe. They gloated over the power of American military might. That's like the heavyweight champion of the world gloating because he knocked out a paraplegic. Iraq could not defend her airspace. She had not shot down an American or British plane in 12 years of incessant bombing in the no-fly zones in the north to protect the Kurds and in the south to protect the Shia. Their airspace was fully compromised. Their health status was weakened. Their water supply degraded. Yes! From the 1991 war, America dropped bombs with depleted uranium in those bombs. And now, shock and awe, bombs dropping, their water supply degraded, no electricity. The hospitals with no medicine. Over 100,000 Iraqis, they say, have died since the 2.5 years that America has been in occupation with the coalition of the willing.
That's right. Teach. Break it down.
We have no power to fight America. The Arab world has no power to fight America. Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda has no power to defeat America. So God must take up the cry of those who cry for justice and deal with America. And that's why judgment has come inside the house. Some of the pastors don't want to say that this is the work of God. What kind of preacher are you? That you read the Bible and you know these kind of things are coming. Now when you see it enter the house, all of a sudden you dumb, you can't find it in the scripture. Have you become Pharaoh's magicians? That you're afraid to point out even to Pharaoh that judgment has entered the house? What kind of man and woman of God are you? You're going to leave it all to me, that this be a solo and not a chorus? You say, Farrakhan, that this is the judgment of God. Well, what about the blacks that are suffering so much in New Orleans? Katrina didn't do that. Katrina had passed. Katrina had moved to the northeast. The eye never touched New Orleans. Wind damage, yes, great wind damage, but not the water. The water came from the levee. But the levee was intact when the wind and the rain went over. What happened to the levee? You want to blame it on Katrina to hide the wickedness. They said a barge had hit the levee, but they couldn't prove that. But when we went to talk to Mayor Nagin, he said there was a 25-foot crater under the levee. And then I got an email from a man who has a show. His name is Hal. I can't remember his last name. I wish I had the email so I could read it. He said one of the Army Corps of Engineers that went down in their diving suit. They saw the breach and saw burn on the concrete. And he took a piece of the concrete and spirited it away in his diving suit, sent it to a friend of his in the Army, and they put it through forensics. And they named 2 explosives that were used. Now, isn't it interesting that the hurricane came and went, and the next day there was gloating saying that it had missed us, and all of a sudden water came. And the water rose. The rich were gone. Look at Willie Lynch in New Orleans. The whites that rule with big money, that's the real rulers. I don't care who's sitting in the seat as mayor. That's right. Then you have the Cajuns, French Canadians that have come down that are white. Then you have the Creole. Then you have the black. Another system of apartheid. The people in the poorest condition are the black. Then you find the Creole living better than the black, and the Cajun living better than the Creole, and the white living better than all. Now, when the levee broke or was blown up, it was the blacks in the 9th Ward who couldn't get out. Didn't have no money. A few days before their little check would come, there were no buses, they had no cars. So the water kept rising. And the water kept rising. And black people went from one level of their little house, climbed on roofs in the hot sun, and saw helicopters pass by. And some of them got weapons and shot at the helicopters because they couldn't get no attention. Black babies floating in waters 20 feet high. One of the top police officers of the police force of New Orleans was in the water working to retrieve people, and a body floated by, and it was the body of his wife. And he took his gun and blew his brains out. Junkies that needed their methadone. But when the waters rose, there was no place for them to go to get their methadone. They broke into hospitals looking for the drugs. Imagine them in the Superdome. Junkies kicking cold turkey. Imagine the horror of that place when the lights go out, no air condition, no water, the toilets filled, people urinating, defecating, walking in it, slipping on it, like it was when we came over on the slave ships. Some people say, Farrakhan, you shouldn't talk like this. But in 1927, the levee was blown again. And in a book called The Rising Tide by a Mr. Barry, he said that white folks met downtown in New Orleans and didn't want the water to come on the other side. So they blew up the levee. And it happened again, and they forced blacks at gunpoint to clean and to build for nothing but to save their lives in 1927. We ask the question sometime, are the children of the slave master any better than their fathers? I remember right after Sunday service, that's when most of the lynchings would take place. Right after church, they would find a Negro, a nigger, somebody to kill, and the children and everybody would gather, and they would burn us or lynch us, and then cut off parts of our body for souvenirs. That's right. And then I read last year in the New York Times that in the Vietnam War, some of these same things were happening with the Vietnamese. They would cut off parts of their bodies for souvenirs. So this new generation, it doesn't appear, is much better than the old. So the scripture says, prepare slaughter for the children, for the iniquities of their fathers, even to the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Judgment has now entered into America. My brothers from New Orleans, my sisters, who lost everything, not to an act of God, but to an act of man that hates the presence of the poor and does not want the poor to come back home to New Orleans, so they're scattering the poor all over America. Listen to this. Strong black men, strong black women who could be used and paid to clean up their city. But contracts have been let out to white companies. And as they were kicking blacks out, whites were flying in to take the money that belongs to those who live there to clean up the debris of the water and the wind. Now, family, racism exists. It exists in the media, it exists in religion, it exists in education, it exists in medicine and law, it exists on the sport playing field, because racism is systemic in this society. Then isn't it reasonable for us to assume that racism exists in FEMA? And racism exists in the Red Cross and the United Way? What took the government so long to respond to citizens? Or are you? Or are you? That's why we need a millions more movement. That's why we need to be on our way to Washington, D.C. on October 15th to say to the government, we protest your evil inadequacy of not coming to the rescue of the poor, the black, the brown of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Mayor Nagin told us that the madness in the dome was such that he gave an order telling the brothers and sisters in the dome, get out of the dome and march on a certain highway to go over a bridge into another parish on Highway 10 that you could get to Baton Rouge. And as they started marching across that bridge, the whites that lived in that town came to that bridge with attack dogs and machine guns. And they shot over the people's heads, letting them know you are not welcome here. Some of them died on that bridge, not from bullets, but from heat, exhaustion, dehydration. And even where they have sent our brothers and sisters, some of them are under armed guards, like they are prisoners in a detention camp. Some of them living in old prison houses. And in mental institutions. Can we allow this to go on and be silent? No, sir. No, sir. Can we allow this to go on and we say nothing? No, sir. Or do nothing? No, sir. Those that are here from New Orleans, this is a trial for them. But it's a trial for the government. It's a trial for FEMA. It's a trial for the Red Cross. But it is also a trial for us. Do we love our people? If we love our people, don't wait for FEMA. Don't wait for the Red Cross. I thank God for the Christian church. I thank God for those Christians that have gone out of their way to go and get those that are deprived and bringing them to their churches and then putting them in buildings and homes and hotel rooms. I thank God for the members of the Nation of Islam who have taken people into their homes, and I told them, share with them your food, share with them your clothing, share with them your shelter, and ask no questions about what their faith is. For Jesus, when the disciples asked him, Master, when were you hungry and we fed you not? When were you naked and we clothed you not? When were you out of doors and we gave you not shelter? When were you sick and imprisoned and we ministered not unto you? And Jesus said unto them, inasmuch as you have not done these things unto the least of these my brethren, you have not done it also unto me. He didn't ask them what your religion is. He didn't say, do you believe in me? He said, are they hungry? Then feed them. Are they naked? Then clothe them. Are they out of doors? Then give them a place. Then you will be considered my disciples. So, my family, before us is a challenge. I am ready, by the grace of God, to go against those who have perpetrated evil to our people. We are ready to force the Red Cross to do what they won't do on their own. That is, to give what the American people have so wonderfully given for the victims of Katrina, but many of them have not even seen the Red Cross. We want to make sure, since Russell Simmons and P. Diddy and maybe Jay-Z and others have given large sums of money to the Red Cross, along with Hispanics, along with white people, we need to force the Red Cross to do what they should do or discredit them before the world. The Red Cross is too white, and FEMA is too white, and they're culturally insensitive to the needs and the cry of our people. I leave you with this picture. Harry Belafonte, in a recent talk before the elders that he had called together in Atlanta, Georgia, to discuss the condition of the black child, when he saw the little 5-year-old girl having a bad day in Florida kindergarten, and the police were called, and they handcuffed the 5-year-old girl, brought her out into a police car, and then bound her feet. And her mother came, and they would not turn the child over to its own mother. When he saw that, he was so incensed, he wanted to call the elders together. And I went, I guess I'm an elder, and I was so proud of the elders because they said they were willing to give their lives to see our young people have a better future. Harry Belafonte said that one of his heroes or heroines was Eleanor Roosevelt, and she invited him and other black leaders to the White House. And A. Philip Randolph, the great union organizer, was there, and being the elder, he spoke for the group. And he stood up and said to the president, "Mr. President," and he outlined a litany of abuse and needs of the black community. And he outlined a litany of things that he felt the president could do to ease the suffering of our people. And when he finished and sat down, Mr. Belafonte said, President Roosevelt opened the cigar case and passed the cigar out to everyone that was present, and then he spoke these words: "Philip, I agree with everything you said about the abuses of your people, and I agree with everything that you said that we could do to ease the suffering of your people. But I have only one thing to ask of you." And A. Philip Randolph said, "Mr. President, and what is that?" He said, "Go and make me do it." Listen to the words. Go and make me do what is right to do, but I don't have the will to do it, nor am I surrounded by people, even if I had the will, that would help me to do it. So you go, this is your assignment, go and make me do it. Now, that was in the 40s. This is 65 years later, and every president from there to now, you can't get what we need because we have not been able to make them do it. Now listen. Listen. Katrina was a level 12 tropical storm, as I was listening to the Weather Channel, and they were saying that level 12 is the highest you can go in a tropical storm. The next step is a Category 1 hurricane. And the difference between a level 12 tropical storm and a Category 1 hurricane is the degree of organization within that storm. So the more it organized, it became a Category 1 hurricane, Category 2, 3, 4, 5. When it was thoroughly organized, the people fled before it. It made them do what they did not want to do, which was to leave their homes, leave their possessions, and run for their lives. The denial objective in America is that black people must never organize. Because once you are organized, the greater the degree of your organization, the greater your strength, then you cannot be denied. So, I think we should now lynch Willie. I think we ought to reverse this process. Let men be men so that our women can admire us again. But you can't be a man if you're not going to stand up at some time in your life. Stand up and fight for your dignity, fight for your freedom, fight for your justice, fight for your liberation. The more organized we are, they're not going to give us reparations. If you are divided, they won't even consider our plea. But if we organize and organize and organize, we'll make them do what they don't have the will to do. So I'm appealing to you. Let's create that movement, that dynamic motion that gives us new moral and spiritual development. We have to reverse the fall of the nation by the rise of our women. I'm asking our sisters that when you come to Washington, please, cover up Bootylicious. Please. Don't let the purpose for the march be compromised by your finery. I want you to get on a bus. I want you to find a way. I want us to help make a way. And we make this protest in Washington. And let Washington see a united, dignified people